Good morning. If I could please ask everybody to take their seat as we are about to begin our program. And if I could please also ask you to have your phones on silent. If we have doctors in the room, vibrate will do just fine. But just to make sure we do not interrupt the proceedings this morning. We'll just give our last guest a few seconds to just settle in, and then we'll start. All right. Thank you so much, Tabiso and the team. Dumelang Absheni, Mora. Okay. Mora. We will knock it off the list. Sanbonani, Ndi Macheloni Abu Dibatubote, and a warm welcome to this special occasion as we mark the end and the beginning of a journey. I will say it's the end and the beginning because once one has taken to writing their story and putting it out in such a special moment as this, it marks the end of their story belonging to just them and their family. And it marks the beginning of that story being handed on to us as a baton to share, to explore, to discuss, to reflect on, and to take the stories forward as we go. Nengadzina ndiphi Ulisani Ravele, ndi muduru wa Nesengani, ni xtukulu xa ka Maluleke, ni xtukulu xa ka Xihlangu, ndi muduru wa Squari wa Chivase, ndi mkololo wa Machekecheke wo lambudza dzima valanda ri do ni thavela kholomo. Machekecheke milenje mipfuphi mahada dudumela. Everybody has been acknowledged on my side. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you this morning to the book launch of The Child Bride, From Captive to Courageous, a girl's fight to rewrite her destiny. Welcome to our guest of honor this morning, Mabatu Sukati. A warm welcome to the Honorable Former Minister of Social Development and member of the National Executive Committee, Lindiwe Zulu. A warm welcome to the family and the children of Mabatu as well, the community of friends, of colleagues, and of course, advocacy agents and partners as well. And a warm welcome to all of you who have graced us with your presence, because you really could have been anywhere. But this moment, this day, this time was ordained for us to be together in one another's presence. So with that, I say all protocol observed. I don't know if I've left out another important person, but you are included here at all protocol observed, okay? Today we celebrate a formidable woman, ladies and gentlemen. We celebrate this woman and her story of courage, of resilience, of determination, of advocacy, and I think above all else, her story of grace. The story of the child bride, from captive to courageous, a girl's fight to rewrite her destiny, may be a story that began in Sabi, Mpumalanga. However, it is one that is universal and one that sadly should not be. Imagine for a second, those of you who are parents, and let me go a step further because I acknowledge what I see in the room. Those of you who are also grandparents, you are seasoned. You're not old, you are seasoned. But I want you to think for a moment that you imagine your daughter or your granddaughter. To those of us who are bomani, borachadi, bomalome, I want us to imagine that niece in our family. Imagine her at the age of 15 being told that she was going to be married off to a man that was double her senior, not even triple. imagine that this is all done under the guise of religion, and that this is how it was meant to be. That this is the journey that has been ordained upon this 15-year-old to marry a man that is almost 40 years old and to bear him children. That is the story that we have come to bear witness to today. And a story that one would think that as Osmabatu stands here in her senior, you would hope that it's a story that we wouldn't need to keep talking about because it would be done. But the reality is, as we sit here gathered in this room, the story continues. In hidden doors, behind silent whispers. You may even work with colleagues whose children are undergoing this, but you don't even know. That is the depth and the reality of the story that we have come to tell and celebrate today. In film, they often say that the more specific your story is, the more universal it is. But so often, we doubt the stories that we all have to tell within us. Yet, there is somebody out there that by reading your story, having heard your story, sees themselves in those pages. That is what we're here to acknowledge today. A woman who courageously penned down her story, her truth, laid down her soul bare for people to comment, to judge, to speculate, to whisper, to perhaps shun her as her own family did at times. But what we will do with this story today is that we will lift it high. We will celebrate it and echo what is written in its pages and take it across our homes, our offices, provincial borders, and even international ones. Because stories like this do not only deserve to be heard, but they deserve to be shouted at the top of mountains for all to hear. With that said, our program is going to be one of deep conversation, deep reflection, but please don't forget that this is a celebratory moment. I know the story is heavy. I know the truth is one that is unsettling, but we must celebrate that this 15-year-old that sits here amongst us, because as we sit in our seasoned age, we bring all the versions of us that have come along. So that 15-year-old of Mabatu Sukati is here with us. And today we say to her, thank you for not giving up. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for being courageous. Thank you for allowing seasoned Mabatu to write your story. We honor you. We honor you. For those of us of different denominations, we know that a day cannot begin, an occasion cannot begin without inviting one power that is above all else and from which all of us come. And so I'd like to welcome Sis Lungi up to the podium to please just open today with a prayer. And for those who would just like to observe a moment of silence, we are respectful of your beliefs and we will acknowledge you and give you your time to do that as well. Sis Lungi? And you know what? The kids of today, we are zero at Sifila. We are not present.
And what a privilege it is to be here this morning. If I can ask that we close our eyes and acknowledge the one who rewrites our stories. His name is Jesus. Father, we just thank you so much, Lord. Daddy, we thank you for your grace. We thank you, Lord Jesus, that it is you that rewrite stories. We thank you that you are a God that we behold, and as we behold you, we are turned and we are transformed into the same image. We thank you this morning that we get to celebrate your son, your daughter, who's also been transformed by the very same image. Thank you for your love. Thank you for the privilege of beholding your glory, the true nature of God that transforms. We acknowledge you this morning as we celebrate Matabo, sorry. We celebrate you, we celebrate her, Lord, but we know that it is not possible. It would not be possible if it wasn't for you. So, Daddy, we give you all the praise and honor and glory for that which you have done in her life. And the fact that we get to read and get inspired by the story that you have written through her. We acknowledge your presence. We acknowledge your glory. We acknowledge your beauty, your splendor. We acknowledge your love. Daddy, more than anything, we acknowledge that she's been fathered by you. Thank you for fathering her so well. Thank you for restoring her soul, restoring her heart. Thank you for where this story is going to go and the lives that are going to be transformed through it. We give you all the praise, all the honor, all the glory belongs to you and you alone in the mighty name of Jesus. And everybody said, amen.
Thank you so much, Sis Lungi. I know I said I didn't have a sefila, but as you were praying, all I could think of was, and I have a terrible voice, I know I'm not a singer and it's fine, but all I could think of was, we give you all the... Bathong thuseng hle di passenger. That's the song. That's the song. Thank you so much, Sis Lungi, for inviting the Spirit into our midst and into our presence. And the word that I take and lean on from your prayer is restoration. Sure. Restoration. What has been taken from you and what has been restored inside of you. May today also be a reminder of your own personal journey of restoration. Because as we look and celebrate one, it must always be as a mirror being held up to ourselves to celebrate ourselves too. And speaking of celebrating, it gives me great honor to introduce the next person who is going to introduce our celebrant for today and our author. And I'd like to acknowledge her in the midst of her siblings, because there's this thing that happens, right? When the one child is the one speaking, it's like, but you are representing all of us, you know? And she might forget. So I'm going to ask all the children of Os Matabo to stand, but I will welcome one forward who is going to do the honor of introducing their mother, our author and celebrant for today. So, Sarona, there you are. Where's Nompumelelo? Not here. Where's Kolani? There's Kolani, my fellow Gibbs MPhil soldier. We're in the trenches together. Where's Dolly? There's Dolly at the door. I love it when they just, hey, Dolly, sukuma sikbone, please do. This is also your day. And then we've got Khudiso. Where's Khudiso? Overseas. Okay, so in absentia. But we've got 3 out of 5. That's a 60% pass, Osmabatu. We are progressing in life. So those are Matabo's children. For those of you that don't know, now you do. And to introduce her with love and I'm sure the most elevated joy, please welcome Dr. Sarona Lingana.
Might be known to you guys as the author, just allow me this honor. So excited when she asked me. Now, what would be fitting for me to mention to you guys out of 40 years of experiences with her? I landed on one thing that I hope you guys take out of it as you read the book, as you keep encountering her. So I think I was 24, 25 doing my internship at Ratong Hospital. I used to come home nearly every weekend when I wasn't on call. And I was complaining, my supervisors are making me do this and that and the other. Can you believe it? My mom looked at me like, you're crazy. If you think that I'm going to be partaking of complaining with you, you've got another thing coming at you. So she said to me, and I hope it marks you for life. Nami futhi, discussing in my articles, I'm not going to look at her. Just to translate, she must have been around 30, in her early 30s, the mother of 4 school-going children. Probably her supervisors must have been younger than her, or at the least the same age as her, making her do tea, make tea for them. She didn't complain. Even when she said this, she didn't have any air of bitterness, any anger, nothing. I don't remember what in the world she said hereafter, what the conversation was like. But what I do remember marked me for life after that, and I'm going to share those 2 things. The first thing was that as a supervisor, as a person, I get to determine how people encounter me. I get to dictate and curate those encounters for people. Yes, people are going to make mistakes. How do I elevate them in such situations? What do I stress? Do I make them the mistake, or do I highlight that this was a mistake? So that was the first thing, and that changed my practice forever. I still complain, but she doesn't still partake in my complaints, but I'm slightly better. The second thing that I learned from that encounter with her is that I get to also give myself the same experiences. If they're missing out there in the world, I can give myself those experiences. That's how she got through such menial and demeaning situations, I'm sure most of her life, consciously or unconsciously. And whenever something is missing in my life, that is what I do. I go back to that moment and I tap into it, remembering that I can also elevate myself. I don't need to wait for circumstances to be right for me. And I think for me, as you go into reading the book, yes, it's painful experiences, but just remember who it is that wrote that book. She is a victor. I call her the future me. If I can be 10% of who she is, I'm done. Like God will say, well done. So I introduce to you your author, my amazing, fabulous, phenomenal mother.
I don't know what to say after that emotional introduction because I'm tearing up a bit. Honorable former Minister and NEC member, Lindiwe Zulu, fellow AMSCO board members, fellow colleagues at Transnet and at SARS, fellow colleagues at PwC, fellow colleagues and current colleagues at MTN, friends. Machupe wants a special recognition at the door because he wants a chair. Thank you for being here with us this morning. Please allow me to read my speech because I'm emotional. So I'll be looking down a bit, but I will be connecting with you as well. So today I stand here before you with a heart full of gratitude, humility, and hope. Gratitude because you chose to be here. You chose to come and share in this moment that is so deeply personal and yet as universally important. Humility because the story that I hold in my hands is not just mine. It belongs to millions and millions of girls who have been silenced by this practice of child marriages. And I truly believe that this morning marks the beginning of us speaking up about it, speaking up and speaking out to try and get people to be aware of it, of this practice, because we speak a lot about other crimes, if I were to use that word. We speak a lot about GBV, a lot about, murders and so on. But the issue of child marriages, there's not a lot of people that talk about it. Yet, it's happening all around the world. I think you will see as you read the book, the stats is going to shock you. This is happening in America, for example, in some of the cults that are there in America. So you will see that this is a global challenge. So the child bride, from captive to courageous, is more than just a book. It is a voice. It is the echo of young girls who are crying out for freedom, for dignity, and the right to choose their destiny, the right to choose their future. They are crying out for the right to rewrite their story or to write their story. It is a mirror that reflects the hidden pain of child marriages, a practice that steals childhoods, dreams, and futures in many corners of this world. When I began writing this book, I was driven by one question. How can a society that claims to be just and humane, how can it allow its daughters to be treated as property? I wanted to tell this story to shed light into that darkness, that dark world that too many girls are forced to live in. But I also wanted to tell a story of hope, a story of resilience, of a girl who refused to let her circumstances define her. At this point, I will pause and ask our program director to read a piece from the book.
At least 122 girls between the age of 12 and 17 went through divorce in the KwaZulu-Natal province. KwaZulu-Natal is the leading province for forced marriages, known as Ukutwala. Between 2011 and 2020, more than 140 million girls would have become child brides. This is according to the United Nations Population Fund. If current levels of child marriages hold, 14.2 million girls annually, or 39,000 daily, will marry too young. Furthermore, of the 140 million girls who will marry before they are 18, about 50 million of them will be under the age of 15.
Process that a bit. Think about those numbers. Were you aware that this is happening? It could be happening right next door to you, and you're not aware of it. Because remember, in South Africa, we have a history of, we have a house in Gauteng, we also have a house, what we call home, maybe in the rural areas. So your neighbor next door could be having a house in Limpopo where this is happening. So this book is my true life story. It's not fiction. As you read it, the first few chapters, you are going to be sad. You are going to feel emotional. At the age of 15, my parents, especially my mother, can you imagine this man, 24 years older than a 15-year-old, wanting to have a 15-year-old, and I had no one to go to. I couldn't go to my parents because they were the reason I was there. The people who were supposed to protect me were part of this whole arrangement. Firstly, I tried to fight physically, and I realized I wasn't strong enough. Then I moved to another stage where I became numb, completely numb. Come what may, there's nothing I can do about it. Think of those girls who are in that situation as we speak today, as I stand here. Life felt meaningless. I became suicidal. I was hopeless. I had nowhere to run to. I had no means to get out of that situation. In my first year, I became pregnant after a few months. Halfway through my pregnancy, there was a day where I walked out and I literally just wanted to disappear from the face of the earth. It was in the evening. Those that know Sabi, I think there was one person from Sabi here that was supposed to be here, but I don't see him. Oh, hi. Oh, hi. How are you? Makosi. So the people from Sabi know my story, but I think Sipo was supposed to be here, and I don't see him here. So if you know that small township, at the entrance to the township, there's a lot of trees because it's a forestry area. So I walked out that evening. It was starting to get dark, and I just wanted to walk and walk, not knowing where I'm going. Until my brother came, across me, and I just heard a car stopping behind me, and he took me back. That could have been a bad thing, but it's also a good thing because I'm still here. Towards the end of my pregnancy, I started to think, suicide is not even a solution for me. I have to protect this child too. I don't want my child to go through what I'm going through. So however many children I'm going to have, I have to fight for them. So I stayed 6 years in that situation while I was planning my exit. And in that 6 years, in five and a half years, I gave birth to 4 children. When I was found, I actually almost died giving giving birth to my second child. And my mom got very worried, and she was a nurse. And she started sneaking in some contraceptives for me. But whenever I was found with contraceptive, I was beaten, physically abused so much that that didn't even work. Nonetheless, when I started planning my exit, later found out I was pregnant with my fourth child, so I couldn't go that year, and I waited until I gave birth. And in that year, that's when I successfully planned my exit with no money. Imagine living a place like that with no cent in your pocket. And I had a friend who rescued me in Bushbuck Ridge. She couldn't make it here. I would have loved for you to meet her, Lindiwe. I think she's probably watching on the live stream. Sorry, we didn't say at the beginning that this is live streamed on YouTube. I moved in with her and we both went back to school. Without giving away too much, because you have to read the whole story. That is how I went back to school. The story about how I escaped, how my studies were funded, you will get in the book. It's all in there. When I actually finished high school, I then went to university. I went to Cape Town, and you will know the reason why I chose to be far away, UCT. I went through a lot of counseling at Grooteskier Hospital, joined support groups through the psychologists. But I kept to myself. I isolated myself from people because I felt different. I was 6 years late. I'm a mother of 4. I don't have time to waste here. My daughter, Saruna, had to grow up very, very quick because she had to take care of her siblings while mom is away. My youngest, Dolly, at that time, she was the youngest, stayed with my mom because she was still a toddler. But Saruna had to take care of the other 2 kids. In the evenings, during the week, for example, we had a scheduled time. She would help her 2 siblings with homework. And then at 5 o'clock, I would call them. I had a landline at UCT. I had a landline where she would read the question that she doesn't understand. And I would explain it to her to say, okay, this is how you get to the solution. And then she would explain to her sibling. So we had all of those controls in place so that even though I'm far away, I can still support them because they had no one to, they lived with these 2 people, but, no one cared about whether homework is done or not. So she had to grow up very quick. I didn't share my story until I was a group executive at SARS. And the reason was I didn't want people to pity me. I wanted to be treated like other employees. When I joined PwC, Stanley, and so on, I didn't want people to say, oh, she got the promotion because of her story. I waited until I was up the corporate ladder to start sharing my story. I will pause and ask our program director to read a piece from the book.
I remember sitting up and aimlessly ambling out of the house, out of the yard, and into the street. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to walk, hoping it would silence the noise in my head and curb the lamentations of my scarred soul. It had been so long since I last strolled freely and unhindered down the dusty streets of Simile. It had been so long since I had a semblance of freedom and control over my life. And then it struck me. I was free. I could finally get away. Instinctively, I quickened my pace, the yellow dress I was wearing flapping with the sudden burst of vigor. My eyes were fixed at the wall of green dead ahead, the forestry that marked the outskirts of Simile, the beckoning shrubbery labyrinth that held the freedom. I could hide. I could hide there where no one could ever find me. The sound of a car screeching to a halt almost jerked me out of my skin. I looked dead ahead and kept walking, feeling an icy shiver creeping down my spine. I dared not look at the car or at who was behind the wheel. If I ignored them, if I pretended I hadn't seen them, if I pretended they weren't even there, I possibly would be invisible to them too, and they would drive away. First came a hooter, and then I heard the car reversing. The sound locked my knees, and I stood frozen on the spot like a statue. My mind was racing, my heart a series of pounding drum beats, and I could feel my legs shaking uncontrollably. The car stopped beside me, and I heard the window winding down. Matabo, where are you going? Dumisho, my brother, was glaring quizzically at me from behind the wheel. I couldn't respond because I truly didn't know where I was going. I just knew that I had to get away, but I couldn't dare tell him that. Come on, get in the car, he said, reaching out to open the door. I dithered about what to do next, mulling over how far I had gone, how close I had come to being finally free. The tree-clad outskirt of Simile was no more than a stone throw away, so close, yet suddenly out of my reach. Had I left the house a minute or two earlier, I would have vanished into the shrubbery long before Dumisho drove past. I slouched, zombified, into the car and immediately got the telltale whiff that he had already indulged in a few. 6 years my senior, Dumisho had taken on the belly wash while still at boarding school, and by the time he got a job as a prison guard, he had already followed in his father's footsteps as a connoisseur guzzler. I also knew where my brother stood on the thorny subject of my marriage. Like my father, my marriage had assured him of a constant supply of his favorite fermented beverages, the perks of being the in-laws to the Mhlangas. So when the car began to move, I knew he was taking me back to the Mhlanga house.
So, a young girl who is forced into an arranged marriage before she even understands what marriage is. She faces pain. She dies inside. She feels helpless. She loses hope. Are we going to be silent as this happens to our daughters, to the girls in our country and the rest of the continent? Are we going to keep quiet? Their dreams are shattered. Mostly don't have anyone to help them. They suffer in silence. I suffered in silence because everyone I knew betrayed me. We cannot be silent. We cannot allow injustice to continue. We have to speak up. Last piece to be read.
According to Save the Children, the devastation of child marriage effectively ends a girl's childhood. Forced marriage robs the girl of her education, replacing lessons learned in the classroom with adult responsibilities, including forced pregnancy, way before she's ready. This not only violates her rights, but it also risks her life, the lives of her children, and the future of her community. About 40 million girls aged between the ages of 15 and 19 are currently married or in a union worldwide. Save the Children's Global Childhood Report estimates that an additional 2.5 million girls are at risk of child marriage globally between 2020 and 2025, and as a result, increases all types of gender-based violence following the COVID-19 pandemic. They project that up to 15 million girls and boys will never return to school after the pandemic, and where we find ourselves now. And children who don't come back and children who have not come back since the pandemic are at a greater risk of early marriage, child labor, and recruitment into forced armies. By 2030, it is estimated that 150 million girls will lose their childhood due to child marriage.
As I conclude, I want to say to you, I have forgiven everybody that was involved. I forgave my parents a long time ago. My mom moved in with me in the last 12 years of her life. I didn't want to place her in a home of, the elderly care homes. I took care of her myself. On some nights, I had to sleep with her because, she was struggling a lot with her health. For me, forgiveness is very important. I live by forgiveness. I don't want to get stuck in the pain and the anger and the bitterness. I wouldn't be standing here today if I had not forgiven. Because bitterness and anger, it distracts you from your goal. I had a goal. I'm going to make something out of my life, and I'm going to protect my children. And for me to focus on those two goals, I had to forgive. I didn't want the anger to occupy my mind. I did not want to rent space from my mind to those people who did this cruel act to me. So I forgave, genuinely forgave, and moved on. Focused on the goal, what I wanted to achieve. I had to do it by faith. Because when I went to university, I only had 9,000 rand, which my mom got from my dad's pension, who had recently passed away. I didn't know when I went to UCT how my university fees were going to be paid. I took an act of faith, and God made a way and brought sponsors for me. So the story as you read it, yes, it starts with sadness. But for me, my focus is the ending. It ends in victory. No one can take my victory away from me. It ends in triumph. So as you read the book, you will feel sad. And I ask you that as you feel those emotions, think about the millions of girls that I'm representing here today. Because I am sorted. No longer feel sorry for me. I've made it. I want you to think about the girls that I represent here today. I've written a poem which is my conclusion, but it's long, so bear with me. I was not meant to be silent. I was not meant to be silent. I was not meant to be swallowed by the suffocating weight of fear. I was not meant to fade like a forgotten whisper in a story carved by cruel hands I did not choose. I was meant to rise. I was meant to rise from the ashes of stolen childhood, to piece together the shattered fragments of my soul, and to weave them into a crown of unyielding courage. I was meant to speak for the trembling girl in the shadows, to echo the muffled cries of the child whose voice was buried beneath shame. I was a bride before I was a dreamer, a mother before I was even a child. My laughter, that innocent golden melody that I had, was snatched away. My innocence torn like fragile silk in a storm. But my spirit, oh, my spirit, like a hidden ember in the dark, refused to die. It burned silently, waiting for the day it would blaze into light. Today I stand before you, no longer a captive of silence, but a courageous song of survival, no longer a broken echo, but a thunderclap of hope. Hear me when I say this. You can break the chains. You can rewrite your ending. Even when the world insists the page is closed, you can rewrite your ending. To every child, every girl hidden behind locked doors, to every child whose tears have been dismissed like they were nothing but rain, know this: you are not the names they branded upon you. You are not the scars they left behind. You are much more. You are starlight piercing through the endless night. You are a dawn waiting to be born. And to the world that dares look away, look closer. Child marriage is not culture. It is a theft of 1,000 lifetimes of dreams. It is an unspoken wound, a silent funeral of girlhood. But together, we can heal the hurt. We can shatter this cycle of stolen futures. I did not come here as a victim. I came here as a warrior, draped in resilience. I came to remind you, no chain is unbreakable. No destiny beyond redemption. No silence too deep to be broken. So let this book be a lantern in the darkness. Let my story be a seed of awakening, planted in the soil of justice and change. For every girl whose voice was stolen, for every soul still waiting for freedom, carry this truth like a torch. You are not alone. You are not powerless. You too can rise. I thank you.
Yeah, ne? Words fail me at this moment. Osmatab, I don't know when you will begin to comprehend what you have done, not only for yourself, but for so many. Not only for young girls in this country, but for the millions across the world whose story you are telling by telling yours. Earlier on, I said we are celebrating a story of courage, of resilience, of determination. of advocacy and of grace. When Sis Lungi came up, we added restoration to it. But you've added 4 more. We're celebrating a story of forgiveness. We're celebrating a story of redemption. We're celebrating a story of victory. And we're celebrating a story of triumph. When Saruna said, when you read this book, you will be sad, as many of us are feeling those emotions so palpable at the top. But she was so powerful when she said, remember who wrote that book. And the person who wrote that book is the one who said that poem, I was not meant to be silenced. The woman who wrote that book in her own words is a warrior, not a victim. And a warrior who is standing at the edge of a war that she is so sure of victory. Because she knows who leads her. She knows who rewrote her story. She knows what mercy looks like. And she will continue to walk in that mercy. Thank you, Osmatabo. Thank you. Phew. I don't believe in coincidences. So I believe in being led to divine meetings. And so even today in this room, you could have been in another room, hearing another conversation, having another experience. But there's a reason that you're here. And I hope that you take every speaker and whatever it is that they share to be able to weave into your own tapestry and know what to do with it next the moment you walk out of this room. Whether it is sharing with others that you never knew that the numbers are so alarming, whether it is buying 5 copies because you are going to give it to your colleagues at work, whether it is the fact that it's Women's Month in a day and a half. Thank goodness July is almost over. It nearly ended all of us, but we are almost at the end. But with Women's Month upon us, you taking the story further could be you phoning the events team to say we need to get this book into the goodie bags for our event. This is how you make the story travel. It is you picking up the phone to a journalist that you know, Guy, to say there's a story I need you to write. There's a story that needs to be heard. That is our responsibility. Osmatabo has fulfilled hers and will continue to fulfill hers. But how do we become the disciples for the 150 million girls in this world that are going to find themselves in the same situation? That is our duty. And with that, it gives me great pleasure to welcome our next speaker, who's going to introduce our keynote speaker, because they know how to observe all the protocol. Please welcome to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning, Sebina Hlapolosa.
Hello. Okay. Thank you, Program Director. Matabo, I'm not sure why I'm here, but I know that you refused to do what I'm doing. And I do, however, have the pleasure of having been requested by yourself to introduce somebody that does not need many words to introduce her. I'm going to be introduced a colleague, a friend, and someone who's become a sister as well. And when I say I know that she doesn't need many words, she also doesn't like to be introduced, to be honest with you. But allow me not to read anything, but tell you what I know about the person as briefly as I can, because it had to be a summary of a summarized summary. So, the person that is going to be taking the floor is none other but the former Minister of Small Business and also former Minister of Social Development, Lindiwe Zulu. Where do I start? I can't start at the beginning, but allow me to hone into what I know bears relevance to why we're here today, without taking much away from who she is. We all know she is an NEC member of the ANC. She's also a member of the International Relations Committee of the ANC. And I will leave other accolades that relate to organizations and sittings that she's in, but would want to specifically say that she was nominated to serve in an international organization that is called She Decides for a period of 4 years. And that nomination bears a lot of relevance in why we are here today. It is about the girl child, and it is about giving the power of the girl child to decide using her own power on her reproductive rights. And as I say, the organization is called She Decides. And I do hope in the future of how Matabo and her work and journey going forward is going to evolve. It is something that I am so sure will cross paths with that future. Lindiwe Zulu is not just what I've said, but she's also a mother and a wife whose history has some similarities with what the journey that Matabo has walked. But I'm not going to get into that. I'm just going to say to you, this person not only serves, but she is humane. I've had the fortune of knowing her since, I think, 2000. And I've also had the fortune of working with her in those years. I think in 2000, when we worked in the foreign ministry, the then period, or Navy, was foreign affairs. But I've also had the fortune of working with her in her office as a minister, and I've had to understand, and I've come to appreciate that she is not fake. And I've come to appreciate that when it comes to issues of women, when it comes to issues of the girl child, she leads from enkabeni, if I can use that word. And I think it is probably why today she's been requested to speak in this setting. And with those few words, I present to you none other than Lindiwe Zulu.
Sibina knows I always don't like being introduced long. I always say, introduce me quick. Those who want to know more, maybe they can Google. But unfortunately, when you go to Google, you also find that there's some distortions because Google doesn't ask you. It just picks from here and there. A very good morning to you all in a very highly charged book launch. I say highly charged because listening to Matabo, I feel like I've known her from long when I actually did not. And why am I here? I'm here per invitation through Sabina, who introduced me here, as well as Mark Indlovu, who they summoned me to a meeting. And I guess they summoned me to the meeting because of my work with Sabina and her understanding and appreciation of my own life that I went through, also having fallen pregnant at 15 and having had my first child at 16. My first child, who is with me at all times. I read somewhere in your book where you say mothers and daughters. The relationship between mothers and daughters, even if they are not with each other, is a very strong bond. Despite what you had to go through with your mother, who was the one that led you into that, but the bond remains the same. And I say so because my bond with my first daughter, who's 51 years old now, and my second daughter, can't be strong than it has ever been before. I also had those children when I was too young. Before I was 23, 24, I already had these two children. And so, Matabo, our stories are almost similar for having had to have children at a young age. But there's a twist of a difference, which I think me and you can have a conversation about some other time, because you were led into that situation. I wasn't led into that situation. I took a decision that was a wrong decision of thinking, as my grandmother used to say, oh, you think you are in love? Cabanga ukuthi usemathandweni. Uzowabona ke lamathando wakho azokubekaphi. Now the difference there was that my grandmother did everything she could to steer me away from that. She tried, after having had two children, she still pushed me back to school. And that's the twist that we will talk about when we have the moment to do so. From the very time that we had the meeting and Sabina explained to me who Matabo is and why she wrote the book, I was sold to attending, even if I was not a keynote speaker. I was sold to attending because when then I met with Matabo, together with Sabina and Maki, I then realized that what she was telling me was something that I had to go through, but in a different way. And so my being here is because I believe all of us who have survived one thing or the other, similar or maybe not necessarily entirely similar, but one story of teenage pregnancy, one story of child bride, one story that I feel still needs to be told. Our voices must rise even higher. And why I am here, it is because reading through the book, I saw the life of thousands, if not millions, of women and young girls who had to go through this pain and suffering. I'm here because I know some of them, like Matabo, were able to rise, but also because I know some of them never made it. Some of them never made it because they died at childbirth. Some of them never made it because they had to run away. And it was so coincidental that the day that we met, when I went back home on TV, I think it was BBC or something, they were talking about the child brides of Afghanistan. and I said, "Ooh, what a coincidence. All the reason why I have to attend to this event today. All the reason why I have to read the book." And Matabo, I started reading the book quite late because I get hectic with this and that. Somewhere along the line, I thought, hey, how can I go and be speaking to an event about a book that I haven't read? So I phoned Sibina and Matabo and I said, please, even if I don't finish the book, I need to have gone through some pages so that I can speak about something that I have read. And reading, didn't I do the reading? I almost couldn't put the book down. Even when I had some meeting, I had to, because it was on, not on, it was on soft copy. So then I was able to walk around with it. And every time I got a moment, I opened it up quickly just to read a few pages. So I thought of the many hours of discussions and the work we have done to create a conducive environment for women and girls. I thought of the national agendas and the international agreements signed to make a change in the life of women and girls. Chapter 6 of this book, Cutting the Umbilical Cord, page 79, makes reference to International Conference on Population and Development in 1994, which called on all countries to eliminate child marriages, as well as the 2023 Global Nairobi Conference on ICPD, committed to eliminating harmful practices on gender-based violence, including child marriage. In this chapter, we learn that more than 650 million women were child brides, and possibly by 2030. Another 150 million girls under the women were child brides, and possibly by 2030, another 150 million girls under the age of 18 will be married. This is what UNFPA says. I didn't think, we didn't invite people from United Nations at all. Yeah, I think please, in your next event, please do invite those people who've done really true research, which sometimes is countered by other people who do so purposefully. Please invite them. And in chapter 10, Missing My Period, according to Save the Children, the devastation of child marriage effectively ends a girl's childhood, which you referred to. Forced marriage robs the girl of her education, replacing lessons learned in the classroom with adult responsibilities, including forced pregnancy, way before she is ready. You will read and feel this in chapter 10, where Mabato gets pregnant from rape from that Mhlanga. I apologize for calling him that Mhlanga. That's how I felt as I was busy reading the book. The pain in reading about the brother who took her back. I didn't know you were going to pick on that, but to me, again, there is a connection, because when I had my second child and the pain started at about 9:10 in the night, and my grandmother was a very tough cookie. She like, you went there, go face the music. She woke up my brother, who is my brother who comes after me, Uvusi, and she said to him, hamba nosisi wakho mthathe umse esibhedlela. At that time, makuthiwa mangithathe onyiswe esibhedlela, it's a walk from home to the hospital. It's a walk of about 2 kilometers, maybe slightly more, but yeah, 2 kilometers, because from Gakhoza to, for those who know Eswatini, Gakhoza to the Nazarene Hospital, I walked in the night. I got to the hospital possibly about 11. on the other hand, you almost had no one except that auntie, angisakhumbula ubani igama lakhe lo, who was fetched to come and watch over you every step you take, so that nothing goes wrong with that thing that was in there. That's the life. That's why I say to you, Matabo, we still have a journey to speak about these things. And you were bold enough to stand up and do this. And let us start this journey now. Me and you and a whole host of others. We are in a smaller room today. And my view is what we need to do. I used to say so in the Department of Social Development. House to house, street to street, community to community. Unfortunately for me, that did not catch the fire. I wanted that to catch the fire because I knew that if we were to do house to house, street to street, community to community, unifying ourselves as men and women, women and men, boys and girls, to speak about these pregnancies that deprive. In fact, in today's world, it deprives both the young boy, if it's a young boy, and the woman. But in most instances, unfortunately for us, it is not young boys. In the main, it's old men who end up making the young girls pregnant. But let us open our ears and our eyes. As I read more, there's more young boys in schools who are making their peers in school pregnant. Chapter 3 of the book takes you through the physical, mental, psychological, and social health of Matabo. Returning home is another chapter. Just imagine the words from Matabo's mother. Matabo, you will not be going back to school, my child. You are 15. You have a dream. In fact, Matabo was even better than many of us. Mina at 15, I was still like not knowing exactly ukuthi ngifuna ukuba yini. It was only when I was doing my Form 4 or so that I decided I want to be a journalist. But Matabo, by the time she was 15, she was already dreaming of being a doctor. And suddenly she comes home and these hard words hit her, ukuthi she's not going to be going back to school. As we discussed last year, you are to be Mr. Mhlanga's wife, that Mhlanga. His people will be coming for lobola negotiations, so you cannot leave the house or your room. You are 15. Somewhere along the line, also in the book, we read about mother-daughter relations. What could contribute to child marriage? We need to ask ourselves those questions as we prepare for the future, because we're not here only just to present the book. We are preparing for the future. And I was saying to program director this morning, I might say what I think should be the way forward, but the way forward must come from all of us. And then she said to me, thank you. We also had that in mind, because it's important for all of us to speak. And what contributes to child marriage? Poverty and economic conditions, low education levels. Boys must be the ones to be educated if they're supposed to be a choice. Mothers, aunts, grandmothers. Grace, in this case, the mother's new friend-in-law. Left in that house, Mabato was numb, physically, emotionally, and mentally. It was also to be another woman to look after Matabo, but also to make sure that Matabo was locked in. So it is another woman who also can also tell of her own pain, which we hardly ever think about, that this woman is forced into this situation. And at number 9, so I say, no defense against becoming a child bride. Now, the church women, the neighbors, the father, What did they do? Matabo speaks about the father who used to be found lying there esofeni, says Puzele, said Pelile. And the father hardly was involved in anything. It was like, we are Hambanje, we are London. And I trace back to my own situation. My grandparents took more responsibility of us as the grandchildren than my father was. But the little difference and the little twist, Matabo, was that my father was also a manager in a milling company. So ubefunda fundile. But ukufunda funda kwakhe didn't mean anything, because at the end of the day, he would come home, ahlale nabangani bakhe, or doctor, or banibani, baphuze, same thing. They would drink, and my father never used to harass anybody. He would come home, go and sleep, and my grandmother at all times had to stand up and do something to make sure that there is change. The pregnancy, of course, a bun in the oven. It's shocking as you read how Matabo, someone would have thought she would have hated what was inside her. She would have thought, maybe I should just abort. She would have thought, I don't want this child. She would have thought, I'll never love this child. But Matabo was the opposite. She decided she was going to protect. And she did. Again, for me, it is about what do we do to create a conducive environment for our girls to begin to have that bun in there because they want to, not because they are forced. And that's why the organization that Sibina spoke about, She Decides, I took upon it like wildfire for me, because I thought this is what we need. We must create a conducive environment for her to decide. Unfortunately, we're still far from that. The abuse that continued to be to the second baby, the third and fourth, you're a tough cookie, they say. Your belief and your children were saved by you. You rightfully say in chapter 12, I was a young woman whose cognitive abilities and emotional strength had been tested prematurely. Can we make sure that in the future, nothing like this happens? They were now so fine-tuned, it would have taken more than the joys of life to dislodge me from the decisions I had taken about my life. When do women make that decision to change the course of their lives? Do they do that because there's a problem now? Or do we create a conducive environment right at the beginning for them to see their future and begin to work through towards that future? And what are those conditions that we say are conducive conditions for us to do that? This is what we have to talk about here as we do our way forward. Why is it that all the fight by women, slowly joined by women, the national programs, the national policies on gender equality, GBV, the judgments of the African Court on Human Rights and People's Rights, laws of marriages, African Committee on Aspects of Rights and Welfare of the Child, I can go on and on and on. Why are these not making the difference? Beyond Matabo and her children who are here, in the entire South Africa, in the entire region. That's why I'm saying, Matabo, this is a beginning of a journey, because the SADC who sits there and have those meetings and take those decisions, we are going to raid them. The AU that also sits and takes the decisions, we must raid them with practicality. We must rate them so that they feel what we are talking about, not hearsay. The United Nations, Matabo, where me and Sibina have been so many times, that is where you have to go and speak. Speak on behalf of all the young brides of the world. Right here in South Africa, we have a litany of laws, legislation, and so forth. The practice is illegal in many countries, but practically, what does this mean for millions of young girls, underage girls? What is to be done? And I think what is to be done cannot only come from me alone. It has to come from all of us who are here. What is the way forward? How do we impactfully and confront patriarchy? How do we confront cycles of trauma that Matabo has gone through? And yet, despite all that, Matabo presents herself with gratitude. Matabo presents herself in humility. More than anything else, she presents herself and she says, I forgive. When do you do that? When do you do the forgiving? Are you forced into forgiving, or you start by forgiving yourself first, as Sabina has always said? Each one of us here has a story to tell. When do you begin, or when do you tell yourself that you are forgiving and giving for real? Because when you forgive and forgive from inside, it is a story that with new beginnings. Your new beginnings was the very time that you decided that I want to come out of this and still be what I had always wanted to be. What is it that has to be in your mind, in your body, in your soul for you to be able to take that decision, but not only take that decision, but act on your decision? One of the challenges we have is about us not acting on our decisions. It's about us fearing the unknown. Matabo did not fear because she could see where the future was. Chapter 14, taking my power back, as I conclude. This is the best chapter for me because I kept on asking myself, the Matabo I met, and they explained to me, having not read the book. And as I was reading the book, I was too much in a rush to know, how did she turn it around? And I found that in chapter 14, taking my power back. A decision an individual has to take. It did just that when I broke from the man from whom I had 2 babies. And you made a big break and went all the way to Cape Town, all the way to the university, all the way to a place that I think at that time, I doubt that it had as much black people as it has today. And you had to be confronted with those other things of racism and all that, because, guys, if we think racism is something that's gone, we must forget it. It's still here. It's still going to be with us unless we behave like Matabo and take very firm decisions about making that change. Matabo took another bold decision to consult a psychologist and joined a support group, and also counseling through the church. Now, towards the future, I go back to what kind of conducive environments do we talk about? Do we want the children to go through the counseling and all when they've gone through this trauma? Or do we include this at primary, high school, and everywhere, where you have social workers? I've been a minister of social development, and Sabina would tell you, my fight was, how can you have one social worker in a troubled school? You are making a burden for this social worker who actually is coming from a burdened environment herself. It's a burdened school. You have one social worker. She has to cover all the dramas and the challenges that we have in the school. And so when we fought for ensuring that schools have social workers so that the teachers can recognize the trouble at a younger age and begin to feed into the social workers. The social workers must then be the ones who are in the school, because social work, you can say teachers are not necessarily social workers. They need to have that as teachers, because now I went to a school, St. Teresa Kamanzini, Eswatini. That school, the social workers were the nuns. Hard as they were, but at least there was something that could be covered, which was not covered by the teachers. And I think that's what we need to do, so that we have more and more social workers who are not only social workers in the schools. Again, when I was in the Department of Social Development, I said, street by street, community by community, we should have social workers. Because in the past, social workers, bekuwo mama, nabo gogo, nabo baba, nabo mkhulu, who would report on you if they see that there's something that you're not doing right. And then the church would be involved, and then the community would be involved. But that's gone now. But if we were to have social workers in communities, especially in those communities where we have troubled homes and troubled children. Now, Saruna, the eldest daughter, lamented about the degradation and moral decay that besieged Simile Township. She says that because she could see. Someone else couldn't have seen it because they could have belonged to Lomdumo nje, ohlala wenzela. But she, in the book, you get it, she noticed that. And her mother then deciding, I'm going to fight for my children to join me in Pretoria, so that and bring them to a place where I can take care of them. And then becoming a family. You became a family, and today we need to ask ourselves the question, what constitutes a family in today's world? What constitutes a family in the South African context? Those are the things that we need to answer. And then, of course, forgiving, my last point. I cannot imagine how you managed to forgive. I had 2 children before I went into exile. And by the way, I think I was saved by going into exile. Yes, for real. Because I had these 2 children. My grandmother had chased me out of home. Unlike your situation where you were from me. Now I'm take your bags, take anything that you want to take. Leave the children with me. I go home because I can see you don't want to listen to me. You don't want to do what I want you to do. And I did. I left, and I thought of you when I was reading there that you went to a home, and you made sure that you are cleaner when I had the same situation. When my grandmother told me to pack my bags and go, I had a friend called Yvonne. Yvonne was a Pinon. They were also a family that had left South Africa and were there. And I went to stay with Abakwambongwe. And my grandmother said, I don't even want you to even come and appear to see your children because you'll influence them wrongly. Imagine those 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds. But I stayed there in that home. And I did exactly what you did, Matal. But why was I able to do that? I was able to do that because I was brought up that way. Bona and my friend started changing her attitude towards me because she thought I was impressing her sister, her uncle, and whatever. So now they were looking at me like I was more of their child than she was. But I was doing that because I was brought up in a strong environment where waking up in the morning at 5, you needed to clean, you needed to sweep, you needed to make sure that by the time we are eskolweni, so dlile usuthi we are eskolweni. So we have a lot to share. And your forgiving has made me even look back to say, who have I not forgiven in that journey of mine to be where I am today? Because I had the mother of the father of my children who didn't want to see me, who said, there's no way when I Stanley uzosilethela lo mntwana owonde kangaka uthi umakoti wala ekhaya. It's not possible. And so there was no connection between me, my children, the father, and that family. But I say going to exile saved me because I might have had the third and the fourth child, who knows? But when I joined the liberation struggle, they said to me, where do you want to go? I said, I want to go to school because my grandmother would never forgive me if I had a chance to go to school and I did not. And the African National Congress took me to Tanzania. From Tanzania, it took me to Russia. I got my master's degree in journalism. I came back with something that I could show my grandmother and my grandparents. Thank you very much.
Wow, what a journey the Honorable former Minister has taken us on. I've never been on the blue train, but it felt like being on the blue train. You see those in the room that are giggling, they've been on it. The rest of us, the joke is on us. We haven't been on it. But it felt as though we were taking off from Epaki and we were meandering through every trail track, every countryside as we make our way down. And just the beauty in how you've truly shared with us that you dove into the story and into this experience so that you'd be able to share so heartily with us. And for that, we say thank you. Roribwanga Manda Mazulu. So in the Barinkas Hoa, in respect of time, there's a fancy way that they put it. Marishebile nako is how I will put it. We are going to go straight into what the Honorable Member Umazulu said to us about what's the action when we leave here. Because so often we get into rooms where we gather and we share so deeply, and then we enjoy the food and we go home. Because you attend them regularly. I'm sure even tomorrow you're invited to another one. But for us in this room, we are charging ourselves with a discussion that we will take into other rooms and to other conversations. And so for the next 10 minutes, we'd like to charge you with what the Honorable Minister had to share about where to from here. And this is a question for you to discuss in your table. And then we will have one member report back to us. I'm a very strict timekeeper. You'll have 1 minute to summarize your point as a collective. Okay? Not 1 minute to introduce yourself and then 1 minute to get to the point. And it's 1 minute to do all of that and to really just leave us with something, an action, a thought, a plan, a thought starter of where to from here. How do we create a conducive environment for the girl child to thrive? Why is there no further progress? What are the practical actions? You don't have to answer all of them. You can pick one of those, discuss it amongst yourselves. And the reason we want this to be a discussion with those in the room is because as Matabo so beautifully dedicates this book, it's not only to the sisters and the women and the young girls, but it's to the uncles and the fathers who do nothing, who sit and watch all of these things unfold. And so when we talk about how we're going to progress the girl child, it cannot be the responsibility of all mama when we're living in a society with all data, who in most cases are the lawmakers and those that should be enforcing. But yet back at their ranch, at their own homes, they are allowing this behavior to happen. And so we're hoping that it is not only a intergender conversation, but also intergenerational. There are the less seasoned ones sitting at your table. Please allow them to also share their views, because what a young person in 2025 is thinking may sound radical to you as a seasoned elder, but it may just be what we need. Because one thing I believe as a young person, I'm no longer youth. Oh, South Africa. I get a youth if I like at 35. I'm no longer there. It's fine. Thank you very much. As an elder of the South African community, I truly believe that South Africa does not have an issue of laws, we have an issue of implementation. And so what do we do about that? So it is 11:18. I'll even cut your time even more. Yabo? I'm going to give you until 11:25. That is 7 minutes to just have a powwow. Pick one question, pick one point that you want to make, and then we'll come back and hear some of the feedback that we have from the tables, and then we'll go into a very quick Q&A with our author, with Sarona, as well as Mazulu, and then we'll wrap things up. Is that okay with you? I know we are running a little bit behind schedule, but we just ask you to indulge us. I think this is an important place to be and an important time for us. So your time starts now. should be winding up your conversation and picking your representative. All right, everybody. Asibambe lapho. I hope you've picked your representative and they're going to do you justice. Where is... down the music. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. We are going to start with the feedback at the table at the back. Because it's always the ones, exactly, most at the back of the class. Okay? Let's make sure that your mic is on. Tabiso is back to the rescue, don't worry. All the levels will be leveled shortly. Let me just get my timer. I told you I'm very serious about time. So think of it like, I don't know who used to do debating. I mean, I never did debating. I would have been good. But anyway, that's irrelevant now. So I think in those debatings, they usually have a time and whatnot, and you must get your point across, otherwise you must sit down and we'll wait for your rebuttal next week, okay? All right, here we go. Is the mic on? At the back there. The second one. Please do stand up so that we can see you in this beautiful room and that all our streamers can also see you. Let's remember the purpose of this session is to encourage dialogue and conversation and just some thought starters on the way forward. Your minute starts now. Wait, I'm going to give you a chance because your microphone is not working. I'll even restart your time. I'm an honest person.
Mic check 1, 2.
Nazo. Okay, go.
So in our group, we were talking about community-led conversations. So we were mentioning what sort of community platforms can we talk about these sort of issues. For example, I was saying that in my instance, I thought these things happen too much in Afghanistan or something like that, when they could be happening just next door. And what's growing, I think they call us Gen Zs. So I know that for me, I grew up when the community has been breaking down. So no one knows what's happening next door, no one's happening. So how do we fix that? We mentioned church. People gather in church and for religious reasons, but there could be community discussions. Abo mama who go to church can rally other abo baba to go to church, to children, to talk about this, right? Second, we have social media. I know a lot of communities have community WhatsApp groups. Usually they used to say, Agna Manzi, Agna Gesi, Agna In, but we could do that to gather people. And in areas like a KZN would be chief forums, right? So to maybe have female representatives, because there's an issue of male primogeniture, so a lot of the Ngosis and Induna are men. And usually Mama here was saying that a lot of child marriages benefit men. So usually they don't have an incentive to change these sort of things. So we should have strong women in those positions to be able to raise them in chief courts and stuff like that.
Thank you so much. Some valuable insight and feedback there, reminding us of the importance and the role of the church. And I think to add to what you're saying, that the church must also be honest about what they're doing behind those doors. Because in situations like Matabo's story, it was the very same church that led her into that situation. For those, it's a bit of a spoiler if you haven't read the book, but there was a prophecy that came from a lady from the church that said, that is why Matabo must marry this man. She had a vision. That is what landed her in that situation. And so when we speak about the church, we must lead with honesty in the church as well. How many of the cases have we seen recently where it is the church that have abused their power and the trust that the congregation and communities have in them? So in bringing the church back into its position as a leader of authority, they must lead with integrity and honesty and hold themselves accountable. Yes to social media, that is where Gen Z is. So imagine a TikToker kind of like breaking down these figures to say, did you know that this is happening? And it's not just in Afghanistan, it's right here at home. So yes to that one. And adding women's voices to the forums where the chiefs are holding their lukhutlas. How are you deciding a child's fate when women are not a part of the story and a part of the decision? And this is where the decay comes from, right? Because true Africans, abantu, bagwantu, will know it was women that led. Niyathanda nithandi. That is how it was. And that is how communities and societies thrived on this continent. Bafika belungu bathi no. This is how it works. Now look at us. Remember, Bagwantu, the role that women played in our societies. They led, and there was a reason for that. Thank you so much. All right, let's take the microphone. Where are we? Table number. Where did it go? There it is. Okay. Hold on. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Good morning, everyone. So our table discussed quite a few points, but the one that stood out was around forgiveness and how important it is and what we've learned around it. And this is a true example of what forgiveness is. And for some of us who are Christians, I mean, Jesus specifically mentioned, was asked how many times, and said 7 to 37, because he knew how important it was for every single person to forgive and how the freedom that comes with it. And so for Matabo to do that and to be free and to be able to achieve what she's achieved now is because she realized that through her faith she could access the blessings that she obviously has now. So I think it's very important. I think it was a big topic on our table, that forgiveness is quite important and something we can all learn from. We did speak about young people. Some of us have got young teenagers who are in a world where they have never been exposed to something like this. They are not aware that something like this is even happening in South Africa next door. And we've never spoken about it. You know, they go to private schools, etc. So we've challenged ourselves that we will talk to our young people. They're about to go to college, so they are probably going to experience some of these girls who are in that situation as well, who are aware of the situation. Now that they're aware, they can spread their awareness on what is going on and how it's important that it can stop. So I think that was the two topics that we spoke about.
Thank you so much. I love those points. Forgiveness brings us to what Mata was talking about and what Mazulu also spoke about when she said, what is the action? And you cannot act if you can't come from a place that is truly forgiven. Because whatever you're building on is going to break if you truly have not forgiven and you're starting from a clean slate. And the conversation starting at home is an important one. So something as simple as tonight when you are sitting around the table with your kids, yes, you'll talk about how netball was, how hockey was. How about, I was at an interesting event today and this is what they spoke about. Do you know what the numbers are? Just to spark that conversation. Sometimes that is all it takes. Thank you for that insight. This table in the front, gentleman and lady.
Yeah, good morning all. The name is Mlamuli Butelezi, speaking on behalf of this table. What we said was that coming out of here, we need to continue to bring the change in every corner where we find ourselves, keep the conversations, 2, keep the awareness going. You know, it's a huge revelation for a lot of us to be out here and to hear the kind of statistics that are being printed about the issues of child rights. You know, so the awareness alone is massive. Then the issue of hiding behind culture and culture issues, you know, particularly important because there is no culture that condones this kind of thing, and it would twala and all these things that we talk about. You know, people do it, but it's not embedded in culture. You know, it is delinquency that's happening in society. Also, we spoke also about the issue of the boy child's issue. That because the boy child issue become the main issues. That the lack of structure and the lack of grooming around the boy child turns the boy child to be the menace to society. And therefore, that also needs to be addressed in conjunction with what we do to protect the girl child. I happen to be the father of girls only, you know, and this story touches me very closely, and that was my discussion with Matabo. So those were the things I think we spoke about in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Rich conversations coming from each of the tables. Be the change you want to be and want to see, and continue talking. I love that. It's not even just about tonight. At the Pride this weekend, are the Boks playing? When are the Boks playing again? Are they done with this tour? Getting very busy. Okay, when you're watching Formula One with your friends, these are the conversations that you must be having around the Pride. Before you talk about how Verstappen is not doing as great as he used to, you know? But these are the conversations that to be like, you know, I was at this thing this week and this is what they said. Because you never know where that conversation is going to lead to just spark the idea. That powerful point of boy issues become men issues, yeah? Because for every man, he was once a boy. And so in us trying to fix the grown men, start with the boy. Then you won't have much fixing to do. Just aligning. But now we're trying to build a whole new car, scrap metal. How far are we going to get? Hiding behind culture. Woo! Yeah, if I can go. This sparks the issue of conversations needing to happen interministerially and or body governance, don't. Controlesa should be having conversations with the Department of Social Development. How are chiefs ruling certain things that are actually illegal? And all in the name of culture. I don't know about any culture that would allow for that to happen to their daughter. Not in this day and age. And the point of culture is for it to evolve. So we cannot say this is how it's always been done. We need to talk about, is it still right to do it now? Because that is where we are. Thank you so much. Where's the microphone? This table. All right, my sister, let me get my timer. You ready? Let's go. Thank you so much. Really resonating with what's been said, right, around the room. And I think the point that you make specifically around community was also at table one about we have become so individualistic. especially as Abantu, it is so unlike us. And I will call it and say it like it is, iyanyanyisa. Gone are the days when we would know what was happening next door. And if it might not be the person in that house calling the police, it was someone in the street. Manje, it's in record. Sizobona amaphoyisa mabafika. Asizingeni ngoba uzosala nazo. Somebody took a risk to sort something out in your household so that you could be here today. But we've forgotten that because it's every man for himself. Nazi nasiphila isilungu bantu bamnyama. And asinfaneli ngoba siyanilimaza. And that is why we sit and need to have these conversations in 2025. Honor thy neighbor. The very church we're sitting in the pews of the rows of week in, week out. You only know your neighbor when you're tithing, but not when something's wrong. Let's go to the back. Anginchiki, siyakhuluma.
Hi, everyone. So I think this was the most robust conversation. So this table was where it was happening. So we talked about the importance of education, and we looked at it at two levels. Firstly, at a family level. These conversations need to happen at home, and we also talked about the community. We talked about the dangers of not looking at what is happening at your neighbor's house. We tend not to be concerned as long as it's not my child. So this child does not want to be in this thing, but because it's happening not next door and not in my house, it's none of my business, I'm just gonna walk on. We are being bad neighbors. It means we need to learn as part of the education to insert ourselves in neighbors' conversations, especially when there are children who are affected, because when they grow up and they say, I was not protected by the community, we are the community that is letting them down. Each individual is a neighbor to someone. You are part of a community. And if you don't do something, don't assume that someone else is going to do something. We have to take responsibility. When we talk about the family, we're talking about grassroots. We look at the fact that it was her brother who actually took her back. That is the one person who could have protected her. That was the one person who could have let her go to her freedom. So if as a family we are not talking about how wrong this is, we're not teaching our children, like it has been said, if they learn that it's okay now, they're going to grow up and they're going to do it, and they're not going to call out this kind of behavior. We also looked at the issue of greed, that here is a father who is suddenly promised money, cows, whatever it is. And if this person is stuck on alcohol, there's instant gratification. Doesn't matter how long this money is going to last, but the fact that it's a sudden fix, they're going to agree to this, even though that they know that long term it is going to destroy a child. And then we also talked about psychological help for the people who are around this person who could potentially be the ones who are helping this person. So we need to create those environments that produce psychological safety for the people to be able to help. We also spoke about creating a foundation that's going to help. So many of us are employed. One of the things that we could do is start getting involved. I've already sent this to my chairperson in my organization as well to say, it's Women's Month coming up. Can we actually engage in such a conversation? Because in as much as people look like they are put together at work, we don't know what's going on. So let's create those environments even in the workplace to make sure that these conversations go on.
Very true. Thank you so much. Thank you for those insights. I'm not going to reflect back on them only because I'm also eating into the time that I'm trying to cut down on. So we'll jump onto the next table, and then we'll go to our final two, and then we will wrap things up. If I could please ask Crystal to be on standby for our closing poem as we are dropping our Q&A.
Good morning, everyone.
Hello.
Our question was about development of a girl child. Particularly looking at rural areas where this happens mostly. I think one of the ways to impede or stop it is to help the community elders, which are mostly men, um, get them access to information, mental development, and so that they can actually value the importance of a fully grown woman. Because most of the time, back in rural areas, they still live by what you call laws of nature. So to them, when a girl child starts menstruating, she's old enough to be a mother. But then the question is she developed enough mentally to be a parent? So now, once you give access to such information to community elders so that they understand the importance of a fully developed woman, I think that's when things will start to change. Yeah.
Thank you so much. A valuable point about practical action that can be used. And so anybody that's at the Department of Social Development or you are at organizations that are looking to do outreach programs around this particular topic, these are the things that you could be looking at. Educating the issue at the source. The girl children are not the issue. I don't think there are many girl children that are saying, Nami ngifuna ukushada in 2025. Nami ngifuna ingane at 15. Next table.
I'd like to greet everyone, Okonalana, and thank you again for opening up such a beautiful session. I decided to put points down because I did not want to forget what I wanted to say. When I listen to Umama Ekuluma, they say it's about money, it's about survival and culture. But the truth is, girls are sold when worth becomes invisible. And Umama, the redemption story, is because suddenly she discovered who she was. That is when she was able to change the story. So we are not fighting against, we are fighting against an invisible enemy. Ogunguti, identity yethu has got nothing to do with anything external. The reason why Begmele aye kwamhlanga, there's worth also attached to, because now she's part of this family. It makes us look and feel a certain way. We are fighting against the identity and the worth. Our worth was given to us by God. It comes pre-packaged with us. It has got nothing to do with what we own, where we are, what we have accumulated externally from who we are. Resilience, those things are pre-packaged. They need to be worked on. So we are sitting here. We need to be dealing with identity, restoration, and self-worth. You are going to rediscover your worth because it cannot be changed based on where you've been and what has happened to you. Yeah. The reason why we are celebrating a victory story is because it has always been there. It just needed the layers to be taken out. All the things. We get to decide the stories we tell from the things we have gone through. Yeah. So it's not what has happened to me, it's what I decide to do with what has happened to me. The past, you can do nothing about it, but today, this moment, you must become the change. What is it that you are going to be doing with what you know today, with what you have had today? You are going to become the change. With awareness comes better decisions.
That's so
thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Let's go on to our last table as the microphone makes its way there. I think it's such a refreshing perspective that you've put on it, because when you know better, you will also choose better and be able to advocate better for yourself. And so not only dealing with the cultural and the patriarchy, but also instilling the self-confidence and self-esteem in young women as well to also say, I deserve more than this. Puti?
question that you'll definitely ask yourself. Was I going to take my sister and run away with her? Or was I just going to look at have a myopic view of short-term gains of alcohol at the expense of the future of your own sister?
Yeah.
The father, the story about the father, looking at it from the perspective of me being a father also, being passive in a situation where your bright child, who's got a dream of being a medical doctor, doing well at school, even helping your father with marking some of the scripts, because the father was a teacher. We always think these things are done by uneducated or illiterate parents.
Yes.
The father was a teacher, the mother was a nurse. There may have been a conflation there with the issue of the religion. Sorry. Together with Sis Maki, when we were given the opportunity to read the book, we went to Ethiopia. And we took it further on the issue of spreading what needs to be done. I think that was the question that was asked.
Yes.
What needs to be done? We took action immediately, and we introduced the book even before it was published to the AU Gender Commission, which Vicky, Maluka, and Matabo is in touch with her. We do hope at some point she'll have an opportunity to go and present when the AU has a summit on the show, not just to women only, but also to the men, because the AU is still dominated by men.
Yes.
Because it is us who do these things, you know, to the women. And some of the things that need to be done immediately.
You say I'm going to have to hold you right
No,
there.
just quick, two things.
Yes, bangibhekile le ngaphandle abaphathi.
Oh, okay, just two things. Two things which we think are important. Of course, the AU is linked to the UN.
Yes.
She decides.
Yes.
And target all organizations and national dialogue and all the provinces. It should not end here. We should make sure it goes to all the provinces. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And please give yourselves a round of applause around the room. I think we had some really rich and robust discussions, and I hope some are thought starters and ideas for yourselves in your homes, in your organizations, and beyond as well. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our celebration for today. But before we go, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Crystal onto the podium to just share a poem with us, and thereafter a vote of thanks will be done. Saruna, are you doing the vote of thanks? Oh, okay. Osma Tabo says she will do it. So straight from Crystal, we'll go into Osma Tabo, and then we'll wrap things out.
Hi everyone, my name is Crystal. I'm going to do the poem Still I Rise of Maya Angelou. I just want to say, Masukati, I'm no longer a visitor there. I'm a child now. I always heard a story, and then she told me in person, and I was actually emotional. I cried that day. But yeah, I admire your calmness, your softness, and the way you forgave. You teach me a lot in all of those things. So let's get to the poem. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trot me in the very dirt, but still like dust I rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Because I walk like I got oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like the moons and the stars and the sun, with the certainty of tides. Just like hope springing high, I will rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders hanging like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries. Does my hotness offend you? Don't you like it awfully hard? Because I laugh like I got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, and you may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like the air, I will rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I got diamonds at the meetings of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from the past that's rooted in pain, I will rise. I am a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling I bear in the tide, leaving behind nights of terror and fear. I rise into a daybreak that's wondrously clear. I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestor gave. And I am the dream, I'm the hope of the slave. Arise, arise, arise. And there I go.
That was amazing, Crystal. Thank you. Osmaki, are you doing the vote of thanks for us? Okay, we are delegating.
Morning, but it feels like evening for me. Yeah. Good day to all of you, and thank you so much for gracing this very special, triumphant day in our lives. You know, as everyone has said, the story at the beginning is so sad. It saddened me when I first read the book. Matabo had asked me to give him my input, and I read the story, and I was just disabled. You know, I couldn't go back to her. And when we met again, I think it was after 2 weeks or so, she said, "Did you read the book?" I said, "Yes, I did, and I finished the book." And I said, "Matabu, I just felt so helpless, you know, because I didn't know what to give to you. But that's not the Matabo I know that I read in the book. The Matabo that I know from our work together on the AMSCO board, the very strong, very conscientious, very humble, very inquisitive person. She is so strong that she is shaping a whole institution. On her own, the ideas that she's brought into AMSCO are just phenomenal. You know, she gives her time, she respects people. You know, Matabo, I'm in awe of you, and I wish you more strength, you know, more happiness, more opportunities with this book. And my plea to each and every one of you is to make sure that we carry her story into our homes, into our communities, into our organizations, where we create awareness about the abuse that happens, you know, to very young girls who have the potential of changing the world. Can you imagine if Matabo had given up upon her dreams, she won't be this Matabo. Her kids as well. I am in awe of you, Matabo's children, you know, for the love that you've shown for your mother. If I've known Matabo for a very short time, but I know about her children. She talks about you all the time and so lovingly. Please carry what she's given to move into the world. Thank you to each and every one of you. Otherwise, if I don't stop, somewhere in my lineage were preachers. So I would keep you here for the whole day. Thank you so much for gracing the.
Thank you so much, Osmaki. We really appreciate it.
Sorry, we are still in the vote of thanks. Just a quick giving of gifts. Sis Lindy, Sis Sabina, Sis Maggie, and if you can come forward, please. We want to thank you for supporting us for this event. Your contribution, I think it wouldn't have been at this level if it wasn't for you. Thank you so much. Sabina, thank you so much for introducing me to Sis Lindy. Thank you for your support. Sis Maggie, thank you so much, and I love you. Can they take a picture quickly? Wait for the picture. Can the young participants on the side as well?
The young participants. Do you know who you are?
Sarona Crystal and Program Director.
Oh, I'm still you. Thank you.
Olani Dolly, come through, please. Let's take a picture. Saruna, come take a picture this side.
That we must be holding our flowers. We're reading the picture. Somebody please give us our flowers. Oh, over there. Okay. Okay, Mama's happy. We all in. Thank you so much. All right, thank you so much, everybody. That brings us to the end of our program. We know we had to hustle at the end there, but I do believe that it has not taken away from the richness of today's conversation and today's celebration. We invite you to please join us for some brunch, lunch, one of the two. We just need to dish up very quickly because we are now clashing with another group that is dishing up for their event, okay? So please just step outside, dish up, and then you're more than welcome to come back inside and enjoy. It's been such a pleasure to be your host, Ubakane Ulisani Ravele, Ndi Masia Ravudi.